Rain, wind and storms are wreaking havoc across northern Europe, with Sweden, Norway, Denmark and Latvia all on high alert.
7 killed, 67 injured as Russia targets a residential building in eastern Ukraine with hypersonic ballistic missiles.
The world of cycling says farewell to the Eagle of Toledo, Federico Bahamontes, who's died at the age of 95.
Rain, wind and storms are wreaking havoc in eastern Sweden, causing damage to roads and towns across the region. 3 people were injured when a passenger train derailed near the town of Sundsvall after the embankment was partially washed away. And in neighbouring Norway, dozens of people have been evacuated. Extreme rainfall brought to the country by the low-pressure system known as Storm Hans has forced flight cancellations and road closures.
Vi jo spesielt oppmerksomme på zoner I bygda da, som skredutsatt for jordskred. Så der følger vi med. Vanskelig å sikre seg mot, men vi nå I hvert fall på alerten her.
Severe weather also hit Denmark with gusts of wind disrupting rail, air and sea traffic. Dozens of holidaymakers on the west coast of the country had to leave the area as beach houses were swept into the ocean. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Baltic Sea, Latvia continues to endure weather more reminiscent of autumn than summer. A violent storm caused severe damage to crops and some houses in the town of Dobele, with trees falling on highways and roofs torn off by the wind.
July was the warmest month on record, according to the European climate change monitoring programme Copernicus. The global temperature was 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than the pre-industrial average for 16 days this month, and 0.27 degrees warmer than the average for July between 1991 and 2020. Records have also been broken for global ocean surface temperature and sea ice mass. This is due to marine heat waves detected in southern Greenland and the Labrador Sea, as well as in the Caribbean Basin and the Mediterranean. After a long period of unusually high temperatures in April, the ocean surface has continued to warm to more than 0.51 degrees Celsius above the 1991 to 2020 average in July. At the same time, Antarctic sea ice extent reached 15% below average, the lowest July extent since satellite observations began. The warming is expected to worsen in the coming months due to the El Niño phenomenon.
Thousands of fans gathered on the streets of Bray on Tuesday to pay tribute to Sinead OConnor as her funeral procession passed through the Irish town. Some threw flowers while others left handwritten notes thanking the singer and activist whose lyrics and actions touched so many people's lives. Her funeral cortege included a vintage Volkswagen van playing Bob Marley music. O'Connor was found dead at her home in London in July. She was 56. Police have not given a cause of death but say it was not suspicious.
At dawn on Tuesday, rescue workers resumed their search for survivors in the rubble of a residential building where at least 7 people were killed the previous day by 2 Russian missiles in Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine, a region where the Russian army claims to be gaining ground in recent days. The authorities announced 67 people had been injured, including 29 police officers, 7 rescue workers and 2 children.
Зараз триває рятувальна операція в Покровську, Донецької області. Після російських ракетних ударів. Ракети «Іскандер» проти звичайних житлових будинків. Всі наші служби працюють на місці. На жаль, є жертви.
Russia's defense ministry made no reference to civilian casualties as it claimed its army had made significant advances while also repelling a dozen assaults by Ukraine's forces. Ukraine announced 22 of its POWs had been freed.
Slava Ukraine!
Draped in Ukrainian flags, one of the groups said they'd returned from hell. Russia made no mention of a prisoner exchange of its own soldiers.
The head of the UNESCO office in Ukraine has warned that buildings affected by Russian strikes in the historic centre of Odessa have suffered greater damage than initially estimated. Speaking in Kiev on Monday, Chiara Detsi-Bardeschi presented the preliminary conclusions of a recent UNESCO mission. Her team visited some of the more than 50 shattered buildings in Ukraine's Black Sea city.
From the visit, is it clear that the magnitude of the impact on the historic city center is wider than what initially expected?
Bardeschi revealed that Odessa's Transfiguration Cathedral, the House of Scientists and the Odessa Museum of Literature were among the worst hit sites so far. She also acknowledged their deep spiritual significance for the people of Odessa. The detailed results of the mission will be compiled in a report to be published in December.
15 years after Russia's invasion, Georgia's president led tributes to the civilians and soldiers killed in 5 days of fighting that left 20% of the country's territory occupied. It is a time veteran Berdia Zazadze will never forget. His unit responded with artillery.
შვიდში ჩავერთეთ უკვე ღამის 12 საათზე. საარტილერიო დახმარება გამოუჩინეთ ჩვენ ბიჭებს. რა თვალებიდან რომ დღესაც არ ამოდის ის კადრები იქ რაც ხდებოდა. იმ ჯარისკაცების დაღუპვები, სამოქალაქო პირების დაღუპვები.
During one of the clashes, Zazadze's unit was surrounded by the Russians. The soldier returned to the front alone to help one of his wounded comrades. For his bravery, he received one of the highest Georgian military decorations, the Order of Vakhtang Gorgasal, which he later gave to the family of a Georgian soldier who died fighting for Ukraine. Berdia Zazadze left the army in 2021 and now lives with his wife and children in a village neighbouring one of the Russian-occupied territories.
China recorded its sharpest drop in exports since July 2020 last month, according to official figures released on Tuesday. Sales of Chinese products to foreign markets fell by 14.5% year-on-year in July, shrinking for the third consecutive month. The threat of recession in the US and Europe, plus high inflation, has contributed to sluggish global demand for Chinese products in recent months. Apart from a brief rebound in March and April, exports from the world's second largest economy have been in constant decline since last October.
Russia plans to reboot its failed moon landing program for the first time in almost 50 years. It plans to launch a lunar lander this Friday after multiple delays. It will do so with a Soyuz rocket assembled at the Vostochny Cosmodrome in the Russian Far East. The Soviet Union's highly secretive moon landing ambitions were shelved in 1976, and no Soviet cosmonaut ever orbited or landed on the moon. Russia hopes Luna 25 will land on the moon's south pole to take and analyse soil samples and conduct scientific research.
Mega Millions jackpot fever is bubbling in the United States as the draw for the chance to become one of the richest people in the world is set for Tuesday night. The country's third largest ever jackpot, worth the equivalent of over 1.5 billion euros, has continued to swell since the 18th of April, as no one has matched the game's 6 winning numbers. The nearly 4-month-long unlucky streak could be all the sweeter for the person who finally lands the top prize, which is inching closer to the record lottery jackpot of more than 1.8 billion euros won in 2022.
France has made it through to the quarter-finals of the Women's World Cup after an emphatic 4-0 win over Morocco on Tuesday. Goals from Kadi Diatou Diani, Kenza Dali and a brace from Eugénie Le Sommer rounded off a dominant performance in Adelaide. Captain Wendy Renard's team will play co-hosts Australia in the last 8 in Brisbane on Saturday. Elsewhere, Colombia kept their composure to edge out Jamaica in a fiercely contested battle. Catalina Uzme's goal in the 51st minute proved to be the difference between the two sides in Melbourne. This is the first time Colombia have reached the quarterfinals of the Women's World Cup. They will take on England next in Sydney on Saturday.
A A 22-year-old Greek football fan died on Tuesday after being stabbed in disturbances outside the AEK football stadium in Athens. 8 people were injured and there were 88 arrests after violence flared between home supporters and fans of Dynamo Zagreb, the visiting team. Greek fans paid tribute to the dead man in social media posts, and flowers were laid outside the stadium. The Champions League qualifier between the two teams was cancelled by UEFA. The planned second leg in Croatia next week will now count as the first leg. Athens will host the second leg with the date for the fixture still to be agreed.
Legendary cyclist Federico Bahamontes has died at the age of 95. Known as the Eagle of Toledo due to his many triumphs in mountain stages, in 1959 he became the first Spaniard to win the Tour de France. Bahamontes was also the first cyclist to complete a career triple by winning the King of the Mountains crown in all 3 Grand Tours, Europe's major cycling tournaments. He retired from cycling in 1965, but in 2013 was named the best climber in the history of the Tour de France.
The director of The Exorcist, William Friedkin, has died at the age of 87. The horror film propelled him to worldwide stardom in 1973, but it was 2 years prior to that he won his first Oscar for The French Connection. That also won Academy Awards for Best Picture, Screenplay and Film Editing, and led critics to hail Friedkin as a leading member of a new generation of filmmakers. Fans have paid tribute to him on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.